All right, here we go again. Buckle up. So, what President Trump did is what a lawyer does, but Donald B. and Donald style. But he didn't have to go to that mode, and that's what should have been identified early on. Right. When a lawyer doesn't have like the law on their side or doesn't have a real argument, they attack the person's credibility and attack the person, which he did. But he doesn't need to do that because that doesn't go over as well. Right. Especially since it's kind of crass, but again, she's obviously a liberal, not politician, a liberal clergy member, right? A progressive clergy member. That's okay. They exist, right? They have the right to exist because why? Because you believe ultra conservative and conservative clergy members have a right to exist. So again, there's a metaphysic there. You have to give space to get space. You can push your way in, but it's not as easy. And that's what you're finding out right now. In certain areas, not all. So essentially, she believes something. She's not a cop. She's not a psychologist. She doesn't understand some larger mechanisms in the things she's speaking about, and that's okay because what I try to reintroduce is the idea that Christianity says we all get space to say what we need to say, and then when it's all said and done, we all go into the afterlife and we represent, a case to God as to why we did something, or that's kind of the traditional theory that came up in the New Testament, right? And that's why I have trouble with a lot of the preachers that speak to Trump because President Trump doesn't understand some of the more esoteric or the more advanced concepts in Christianity because they shy away from it because it doesn't maybe present their point of view, or maybe they're just not intelligent enough. Right? So you may not agree with her, but she presented it in a way that is pretty hard to attack, really. The only thing you can attack is it was pretty crass. It kind of, it's Donald's Day, and she said that. But again, she spends her time with that community, and she believes something. Again, we used to be out on a street, and you'd find, these young women that were doing like college get great age, doing charity on the street in the low income communities, right? And they didn't understand anything. Right? They just were, they felt like this was a good deed they were doing, but they were, down drug culture and all that, right? So, and they were kind of get involved in it a little bit too far. So the idea was that your position was defensible with I think there's probably a couple talking points previously articulated or parts of them that could have been used. And essentially, the immigrants aren't even safe. These numbers are unsustainable. Right? We have our own people living on the street, and then we're housing all these people from other countries. But we can't. You can't help people you can't help. It's actually making it worse because many of them are in bondage, with the migrants, or what are they called, aliens. ET phono. So thank you, friend. That was taken care of, and then the other one, the LGBTQ people. What we're really doing with the youth programs, I know for sure that there's probably unlawful influence. It's just a hard case to make. So what we're trying to make sure is that there's no inappropriate manipulation and influence. And it's already been proven, but the data hasn't been put together intelligently. That online, that there's these, I think it was 3 boys, never ever even thought of being trans, and as soon as they got online into a certain community, they are all trans. They all transition. So it's kind of a peer thing. But we don't. But again, just because it's a peer thing doesn't mean that there isn't unlawful influence, or at least inappropriate influence. So well, the psychology is this, and I brought that the other day. So initially I was reading that Not too many people detransition, like these kids. And at first, it didn't hit me. Then I figured it out that the earlier they transition, the less likely they're going to detransition because that's all they know. There is no, when it comes to, so again, when I say Clarence, I was getting this blip from Clarence Thomas that you don't really have a case because you don't have the science to go with it. This morning, this kind of came up in the mind that Clarence Thomas kind of sent a blip, whether, it's his bodily self or not. It could, sometimes you just connect and get something on the inside. And he said, that's what we need. We need the fact that psychologically, the earlier they transition, the less likely they're going to detransition, which is another reason why you would wait. Right? You just kind of go through a little bit of whatever is available without the serious alterations of the bodily systems. But you have to put it together with the science. Oh my God. I'm sorry. You have to step away and let me think. All right, I'm an open channel. I'm trying to pick up from whoever out there, and then these muckety mucks that you let stalk me all these years are wired in to interfere. They can even sound like they're trying to thank me for something. So you need to get rid of them. You need to get rid of them quick. I mean, get rid of them. They need to be out of this state at least. Right? They don't get to live here. That's their theory that people don't get to live here. They don't get to live here. They need to be gone. Got some soup here. I'm letting it cool. A little ramen. Ramen's so good sometimes you eat it too hot, right? A little miso ramen. So again, there is, and if you overstep your bounds and you start discriminating against people, I'm not backing that program. Right? Just because I'm sitting here saying this doesn't mean no matter what you do, I back it. You need to give people their space and their way. Right? And I'm not saying that the bishop was right for bringing it up at that point because she was part of that service, and she could have said that after the service. Right? She could have, contacted the news and say, "Yeah, I'm the preacher from today, and this is what I believe," or something like that. But again, she's not totally wrong because this history of spiritual people is that's what they do. Right? Well, she's not intelligent as far as what it all actually means. And that's okay because people in the clergy don't necessarily need to be that level of intelligence as far as government operation. And she provides comfort to them because I brought up the fact that once the psychology is changed, it's changed. But what I don't believe is happening is there's not enough counseling in the other direction. They actually even outlawed it. I mean, it's appalling. If people want to try to be non-trans and heterosexual, then they have a right to that counseling. Thank you, Larry. I was a big backer of, I'm not into a church beating up on a kid till he's not, says he's not gay or something like that. But there is ways to counsel, and there are legitimate psychologists that were afraid to counsel because they made it illegal. I agree with you, sir. Hey, those two voices were probably them. They need to be removed. They wired me for decades. They're sickos. Devils and sickos. Delicious soup. No, I thought we were going to have to run to the store and buy food. And I found all my ramen. And then my miso packets and soup base. I got another few days of food. I mean, I have food, but I'm trying to. I don't want to get back into the Indian food just yet. The spicier sauces. So again, there was a response that articulated the point of view. So again, when lawyers, the way lawyers argue, there's no need to do what was done. And again, I don't. I think it's a 50-50 thing. I don't think she scored points. I don't think Donald Trump scored points. I think it's just kind of a neutral thing, but you have to be careful because that could happen. And then we do have to have some compassion because we could trigger things that could cause harm to the children, even though we believe a harm is occurring, that they're being inappropriately influenced at a young age and not given the opportunity to make the real choices. Uh, there's a psychology there. Right. So when they're damaged, they have to be handled a certain way. Again, I try to differentiate between how we need to speak to the child versus how we speak to the adults. Well, it's the same thing. If a child is influenced to believe that they're trans and maybe they're not, and again, I'm not. There's doctors out there. I leave it up to them to make some decisions. I believe some doctors are quacks, and that's obvious. On both sides of the aisle, and everything in between. But again, there could be inappropriate influence making the children afraid. As far as all these things, they give them, chemical castration. I mean, in some cases, right? That's inappropriate. Again, it's a culture that has a right to exist, but again, it doesn't have a right to go past a certain point, just like everybody else. I mean, you're not going to get arrested if you give your kid a beer. But if you give your kid a beer every day and a six-pack on the weekend, you'll probably get arrested if they find out. So you see, again, the same idea. Well, when I was a kid, my parents would every so often give me some sort of alcohol beverage. I mean, really, not much, but you go to synagogue, you get a little thimble of wine as a kid. I mean, maybe they don't do that anymore, but right. So you don't get arrested for that, but if they tried to turn me into a steady drinker, they would get arrested. So again, we don't try to push certain things on kids. You can, if a doctor finds they have gender dysphoria, and I don't know if the doctors are really intelligently investigating the influence, which generally is where the government would then come in. And again, when you look at a 15, 16-year-old kid, or even some cases, 12-year-old, 10-year-old, once they believe they're trans, they're going to believe they're trans. So again, at that point, we have to honor that psychology because then we go into what's called gender dysphoria. Right. I mean, I'm not saying the kid's going to stay like that their whole life. I don't know, but that has to be honored because then you can damage the child. So once the psychology was changed, they have to be counseled back if possible, if it's what I'm saying it is. But as I said before, you have to do your studies. You have to present your evidence using science. So just because a doctor says a child has gender dysphoria doesn't mean that it's clean. It could have all sorts of things in it. Right. But for all intents and purposes, the child does have gender dysphoria. Now, it could be temporary, it could be permanent. So one of the things that happened, Hashem connected me, God connected me into some of the more famous abduction and sexual offense cases where we rescued children. And we looked at some of the changes in metaphysically, through psychic connection. We looked at some of the changes in their life. I've articulated different types of changes in Elizabeth Smart. And they actually suggested that she should not become a U.S. attorney right off the bat. Like she needs to, come to grips with things, decompress, and maybe her whole life. And again, she never did, I don't think. Yeah, she became an advocate, I think. Right. So again, the same thing with boys that were not gay before the abduction, and now they're adults and they're gay, and they attribute that to the abduction, and they're trying to sort out. Again, I don't have an answer to all of it, but again, to be aware of what's happening. Well, it's metaphysics and in psychology, but again, the psychology is an abuse of psychology that was used on them. Thank you, Larry. Well, again, her answer isn't prosecuting sex offenders. Again, I'm against that kind of mentality. The answer for Elizabeth Smart wasn't, being a U.S. attorney or something and prosecuting sex offenders. Her whole life reliving that battle. Right. So again, she went on some things, and I think it probably straightened her out a little bit, straightened her mind out. I mean, a little bit. She went on a mission. I think she was a missionary and some things after that. So again, as being a Mormon, a Latter-day Saint, it was probably a little easier to work through it. Thank you. Thanks, Larry. No, that was a real thanks, that one. Trying to find my green tea here. Now I found something that finally was pleasing with a little bit of caffeine, not too heavy, and I got back to my green tea. I went to sleep early, took a nap yesterday, so again I couldn't stay asleep. Okay, so before the Ukrainian war, and we sent all the big drones over there that we had excess, theoretically excess. Again, we probably send things we shouldn't have. I recommended that the city police, just like the MRAP, they had the MRAP for the SWAT teams and stuff, that they go and grab the drones, the full-size drones, because they're more robust. You can patrol a city. You can help patrol a city with it. You can go after people that are fleeing and eluding with it, and never lose track of them. Right. So again, I'm still there with that, but again, the border has use for that. So military intelligence people are generally cleared before, I think, even before they finish their advanced training. Right. So I'm not sure what units you're using, but we do have independent military intelligence units. Some are already working on the border. Right. Some are actually at forts that have systems built into the fort. Right. It's very important for us to see without having to stand there to look. That's one of the most important things on the border, because then we can increase our reach. and then the rapid deployment, the early warning and the rapid deployment. And I'm not sure, like I said, I think, because the way the United States works, somebody is usually supposed to stand before a judge. Right. So I think the court might opt in the long term that even if you're removing them based upon that, they might want you to take them before a judge. And again, a lot of the immigration litigation doesn't make sense because the judges are just like, it's in some couple news articles too. They're like, but there's no real legal reason. They kind of a gut feeling, kind of checks and balances, kind of whatever it is. Some sort of theory, legal theory. They believe that some process should take place. Kind of like where we are with DACA. It's kind of a legal program, but because it existed for a period of time, they believe it's kind of grandfathered in. I think that's where they were with it. I don't know where they're going to go with it, but that's kind of where they were with it. So, as far as removing an immigrant because of a communicable disease, I mean, you can argue that any process is risky. I don't know. Well, it's actually been that for a long time. It isn't just COVID. It's you have TB and stuff like that down in Mexico. Right. But I don't, I just think at a certain point the judges are going to go, well, let's at least take them before an immigration judge. And let the immigration judge make the decision. And I think what you'll end up with is there'll be a small percentage of people that will probably be, they'll say medically test this person, and they're not going to be deported. But I don't think it'll be the numbers we're looking at, or we were looking at. But we'll see. Well, because COVID was a unique situation, so it passed muster under COVID the way I guess we're doing it now. And again, the judges may find that it is that crazy that we should, just turn them around for now. And that would just complicate it a little bit. Like I said, you put the judges on the border. And it's kind of like almost like the initial appearance, intention hearing all in one, and removal hearing. Right. Unless, again, the only people that can approve somebody seeking, I guess, relief on the border is the Border Patrol director, I guess, and his deputy director. Right. So you already have some sort of mechanism to say somebody could stay. Again, of course, we have a lot of people that are helping us. If they come across the border, you automatically get amnesty. Right. Well, there's people living in the United States today that were helping fight the cartels, and they zip across the border real quick when the heat's on, when it looks like they're going to be killed, and then they survive, and we set them up here somewhere. Some of them were like chiefs of police and stuff like that also. Right. Like they identify. I guess they just drive across and identify. who they are, and then that's it. They get whoever it is involved, and they get relocated. Well, again, the idea of do the pardons at a certain point, especially preemptive pardons, do they begin to thwart checks and balances? Again, it's a unique situation. Trump did telegraph something. Right. However, there's also the entrance of the entrance of checks and balances. So they could say, you could always, there's theoretically protections. Like I said, I mean, they're saying Trump's removing the protections. I don't know if he can. Right. There's a couple positions that he can't. I don't think he can fire. So for a season, again, sometimes judges will allow something for a season, and then at a certain point, they'll say, just kind of like Roe versus Wade, the way they knocked that out of the way. I said, well, there needs to be, if you want it to be a federal law, then you need to make it a federal law. Right. So in the entrance of combating COVID, they allowed it, but at a certain point, they might say, well, you need to put something in the law. Maybe there is something in the law. I have to look at it. I think there is something in part of the Immigration Act, right? But I don't know. Again, what is the standard? And if that right, there's always a communicable disease at that point. So again, they might say, well, it's overly broad. That's what I'm trying to say. That would make possibly what we're doing now makes it overly broad. All right, the two things that the conservative, when the conservatives go over a certain line, the two things that they don't do well is women whimsy and overly broad. So that's probably where, because that already came up, I think some of the trans laws and stuff like that. So essentially, we go back 50 years or whatever, and there's communicable diseases everywhere, and we never did anything. Now, I don't know when that act was modified for that. Or the judges might say, you're right. We maybe should have did this all along. Well, because when people legally immigrate to the United States, I believe they have to get vaccines, they have to show their vaccines, they have to go to doctors. So again, that's the other argument, that these people have not prepared themselves to enter the United States to begin with. We don't have immunization cards. We don't have clearances from doctors. Thank you, Mary. Well, it costs to be very probative to clear them. So again, the release into the United States was overly broad. Right. So again, maybe that was an argument that you all could have made, but didn't. So again, that's also what the court can look at, that we're combating these large numbers that are unsustainable. So when there is a communicable disease, it's a little more tricky, isolating that disease because of the numbers we're seeing. Again, we're not getting the assimilation we used to get. I mean, once upon a time, there were, Spanish culture, bilingual, different, Irish Americans, Russian Americans, they had their own culture, but they sought to assimilate to a certain degree. And that's kind of not happening. It's kind of in vogue, but it doesn't make any sense. That's part of the problem also, because if you don't assimilate, you limit yourself as to where you can work, what you can do. And what inroads you make into the society. So again, I'm a big person that believes in assimilation classes, like citizen classes and assimilation classes. Again, we're not trying to hurt anybody. We're just trying to help them understand. Again, people from other countries rape because that's what they, in their country, when you rape a woman, the woman has less rights, or the young girl has less rights, and they bury the case. So we're actually helping them to understand, hey, you do that here, it's not the same as where you're at. And then you might want to find some of the people that immigrated, and that I remember there's one in Texas, a couple in Texas, where they did get the book thrown and they got 14 to 20 years or something like that. And in their country, they get a slap on the wrist. Don't do that again, kind of deal. So you could put that in a class, interview those people, give them something if they are willing to be interviewed, and explain the situation where they came here. They thought it was like Afghanistan, and when they got here, they realized that the laws were different. There's a certain level of ignorance. I mean, they should know better, but again, their culture is different. So again, you could also have an English proficiency class, but if you do an English proficiency class, you need to have a waiver if they honestly can't do it, and they have reason to be here. But we should encourage English proficiency, and we should provide, a network of classes for that. Again, just enough, nothing. They have to be English majors, but we should encourage them. Again, that's just what the idea is, to encourage them to assimilate, encourage them to learn enough English that they can at least get down the street. If they need to ask a question, they can find directions and that kind of thing. Again, it's a process. It's not going to happen overnight for people that are, for whatever reason, are staying here. Well, I just found it. I didn't find it ludicrous, but I found it like I knew what it was. It was like I wouldn't say it's comical because it's sad, but in their country, again, our soldiers were having trouble in Afghanistan because young boys were being raped and nothing was ever done. It was pseudo legal. So they come here to the United States and they're in those shelters and they're raping children. And then they, all of a sudden looking at 14 to 20 years or something like that. So there needed to be some education there right away. They need to be apprised of the laws of the United States and telling them that it's very different here. Thank you, Mary. And again, President Trump got dinged for some of the Afghanistan immigrants that have been cut short and they're not coming here, and they were actually helping us during those wars. So again, there's going to be, I imagine, some future changes. Again, you verify. We don't know what the Biden administration was doing, who they were letting in. but theoretically they had ties to the United States and helping the United States. Oh yeah, I did see the information on Madalena Kojikari and her case, and I did. Yeah, I responded to that. Well, it still doesn't mean that there was a sex crime. I don't know how upset the mother maybe became about a relationship with Palmer, the man, the husband, and parents will blame it on the children. She may have killed the child, and she may have covered up blood evidence, or there could have been sexuality also. So one of the theories that I came up was that she was just angry at the marital problems and may have been taking it out on the child. But I guess the money, there's some money question there, and I don't know their money. And I look at foreigners all day long, and I don't want to be a jerk, but and a hater, but they got money, man. I don't know where they get their money. You don't allow me to have money, but you allow them to have money. No, they didn't allow me to have money. Believe you me. The government decided something, in idiot land. Like Rick Henry and Karen Shelton decide that I won't have any money. I mean, what the hell? Huh? God will get you, believe me. You have to pay that kind of stuff back. Right? There's a lot of things that you can do in life and never have to pay. Like if you're like just somebody who never had a chance in life and you murder somebody, God forgives you. Because God weighs everything. God's justice is immense. When God told me about the thing about, I read maybe a million times, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. Right. And all that type of thing. And I never sunk in. But that's how God judges. If you're wrestling against something that you can't defeat, you're not responsible. So again, these people are ignorant, or they want to act ignorant, should I say. They're willfully ignorant. They know there's power spheres and power structures, and that they can lord over somebody and alter them. Correct. So there's the proof there. But that's how God judges it. They're responsible. You can actually murder somebody, and if somebody destroyed your life so that you did that, or did something to you where you couldn't repel that, then they're responsible. Why would God blame you? So again, this is the answers of all the scriptures as to what the mechanism is. Because Hashem said to me, God said to me, I don't forgive people. They're forgiven because they're not culpable. And again, maybe God forgives a few people here and there for whatever reason. Actually, no. God says no. Right? They tried to put that in my head. It's actually a calculation. A lot of what God does is science and technology, and it's just people don't know how to read it because again, the answers weren't there in primitive culture, and we lost a lot of communication, or people are afraid to communicate the truth. So God said to me, God said to me, I got a thought real quick that maybe God forget. No, but God doesn't forgive people. They're forgiven because they're innocent. And again, that came up at a certain point in Christianity, innocence. 100%. And again, it's in Judaism also. Right? And that's why I say to the kids and the gods, you got to be really careful about that stuff. Right? Well, if you say somebody's going to grow up to be terrorist, then they might grow up to be terrorists. I mean, you're rich Jews. Then be careful what you say. You might get what you want. Right. So Hashem does take into consideration what wills exist, what magic is used against you. Again, if I do a cast, maybe they say I cast a spell, but if I curse you, it goes to Hashem. So I don't curse you. I can't curse you. I have no power. I could have that power if I wanted, but I don't have that power. And again, a lot of it is what a prophet does to make you afraid of being the wrong type of person. And maybe the next generation is very important too. If a person is never fully, I wouldn't say fully aware. If a person isn't aware beyond a certain point and able to make changes in their life, then they're not responsible. What we call mental illness. Most people aren't health responsible. Now, there are types of mental illness, like narcissism, where they would, there's a probability that they would be held accountable. Right? Again, the people I speak about are held accountable. Now, remember, I always say God can forgive you. But based upon ages and ages of transmitted divine thought and technology, religion and things like that. And again, religions don't effectuate religion, that's for sure. Right. So again, don't point to your local religion and say it's me. Right. That you won't be forgiven all of it. Well, a devil is a devil. A devil isn't somebody that sins. A devil is somebody that causes someone else to sin, and that's a metaphysic, but also a psyop. Q clue. Well, psyop requires demonic and activity and witchcraft. You all developed a world where we need psyops. So we'll move on to that. Putin. All right, so what we have going on is the same thing I said before. It's just a little twist to it. Vladimir Putin and Zelensky are stuck in this big gamble. Lucky 7, this is when we're going to win. They have to be extracted. That's why we need third parties. The United States can't send troops because our troops were part of NATO exercises, and we obviously sent a lot of money. Right? That would be unfair to Russia. So again, we're back to the beginning. Like, what is fair, and how can we stop this thing? Right. Now, I don't know if he, again, I don't know the full thing. Keith Kellogg might be out there, and they won't listen to him or won't work with him. I don't know what's been tried. I don't know if Trump's just, saying, okay, let's get moving on this thing and putting his fist down. I don't know what's going on because I'm not there. I mean, you probably could have made it so I could receive messaging if you would have taken care of my life maybe 8 years ago or 7 years ago. They know what they're doing. They're dirtying the person. But again, I'm a victim. Nothing that's happened in my life matters. I'm owed millions and millions of dollars from every government that's ever done this. And that includes foreign, federal, state, and local. Each one owes me millions of dollars. Regularly. It's torture, man. Out and out known torture. With an attempt to adulterate the victim into crime and that type of thing. Sickness. It's a sickness. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Larry. So we have plenty of nations that are generally more neutral. They're not out there deploying across the world doing anything other than peacekeeping and police work. And that would be fair to both sides to bring, some of them in. The drip started again. I'm trying to figure out what's triggering it. Oh, it's a little warm in here. Dust mites are kicking up. It's not the cleanest in here, so I'm just waiting for it to get warm, and then I'll do like a clean. And I'm turning on the air purifiers. I turn them off the broadcast sometimes. Yeah, it's above high, I think. Still, there's a level above high, and that's extreme for dust and dander, and I think we're still there, right? So again, I can't tell you whether anybody's honest, but what I did observe is that when the Russians said they wanted to have talks, that's when Zelensky moved into Russia, and maybe he believed he could have leverage if he did that in the talks, but he short-circuited the talks. They never moved forward with any talks and negotiations. Well, we don't know where the Russians were at that point. Again, if Vladimir Putin and the Russians were looking for an off ramp, they may have been willing to negotiate without any leverage. So again, the idea I explained is early on is you have an off ramp, take it, because if you don't take this off ramp, there's not going to be off ramps for a while. So we need to create off ramps. The idea of U.S. soldiers moving into the battlefield. Number one, Trump wouldn't do that because he's against having that kind of intervention generally. Secondly, we're not neutral. We weren't neutral, so we can't move them in. You have to find somebody that's neutral, and there's even like island nations that they send their people. You have to be careful because people are going to try to infuriate Vladimir Putin over what Trump said. Right. They're going to try to play his mind, play his emotions. So yes, the Russians have to stay steady. Well, Trump says what Trump says. I mean, I just don't know, like, the Keith Kellogg call him and say, hey, they're not cooperating. I don't know if that happened. Or I don't know, we may not have even started because the president just took the office. But what I recommend, and again, they don't do everything I say, and that's okay for whatever reason, but I recommend that you seek spiritual power in your negotiations. Again, I think you should use Jewish and Greek Orthodox, and maybe the Catholic. I know maybe you find a Catholic church. I don't know how it works in your countries. But I know you're Greek or some form of Russian Orthodox, Ukrainian Orthodox, and you have Jews, and I'm sure you have powerful Jews. Okay. So you use your one day or a couple days you meet in a synagogue, then you meet in a Russian Orthodox church, then you go over to Ukraine, you meet in a Ukraine Orthodox church, or maybe a synagogue over there, and you have a short service. You do your blessings and your sacraments, and you definitely for the mood you bring in some music. So again, obviously Saint Basil wants you all to cease. So I don't know. Maybe he's going to get involved. I don't know, because they can make a mess of things around you until you do what they want. If the saints come in and start altering things. So again, there just needs to be a tone of fairness, and that would destroy the tone of fairness if we brought U.S. troops in. Even if Vladimir Putin would accept it, it's just at this point, we need to just present that neutrality, and I believe that neutrality was not presented before the war. And maybe you were mad at Putin, but again, it's not worth it to not seek the off ramp with everything we had. Well, I think Zelensky said he's not worried about the land was the last thing we got to. And that probably solidifies everything. But I don't know, if we should actually just say, okay, it's Russian land. I don't know if we should do that either. Again, I believed turning those into autonomous zones for a period. That's where the peacekeepers come in. They could, move into the contested regions. Now, as far as that chunk of Russia, I don't know. I don't know. It's a large. I think it's a larger chunk. I don't. Maybe it's not. All right. Well, again, they don't. It doesn't have to be an autonomous region for 20 years. Just so we can get to the point of everybody pulls out and goes home. Right. Again, for all intents and purposes, that's Russia. And all intents and purposes, that's Ukraine, I guess. I mean, I don't know if Putin can get all that, even though Zelensky said, okay, I don't care. Let's just get to the other side of this thing. Right. I don't know if the outcome should be that Russia gets everything. Right. But then again, if those are ethnic Russian people and there's a problem, then we need to do something. And there are questions about some children being moved into Russia. I don't know if that's propaganda or real. Right. If there's missing Ukrainian children, we need to account for that. So again, there's a lot to do, but see how this just happened? You see how it got junked up? We can't do that. We have to get to the peace side of it first, and then we can discuss other things. And I think Zelensky, at least before, articulated that he's ready for that. The question, and I think Putin did to a certain degree. Again, Putin has his way of speaking, and he did say that we need to respect all of our people. We just need to learn respect for one another. We need to do that. We need to implement it. Right. Well, I always tell you that the issue that we're having could have been solved 10 years prior. It's not like the day before or a week before. So I go back to the idea that we had, you look, where did it go wrong? You know where it went wrong? When we stopped having military exercises between the United States, NATO, and Russia, being part of a cohesive, United Nations. Right. So that's really, so it went wrong as early as probably 2000 or so. Again, it makes sense because that's when my life started really falling apart. Well, again, they were killing the peace and people that were part of it, the Cold War, that kind of thing. Then Bob disappeared. We never did find what's his name, huh? Yeah, I thought I was playing that one crook guy, a Russian. Can't remember his name. I think it's one of the cases Bob was working on or something, or one of the group of people Bob was working on. Couldn't find him either. I remember his name. I have to look it up. Definitely a powerful person, as far as power goes on the planet. So again, we stand on the doorstep of something, but you're not going to get there without changing. And again, at least I'm glad to hear that, hopefully it's true that Vladimir Putin says that we all need to change, and we all need to understand respect. Well, my idea is that NATO is not the big scary thing, but again, when you have people that are corrupt in government, then it becomes a big scary thing. Because you have corrupt people running them, then there's no assurances. Right. Well, if they're like, again, ethnic Russian and ethnic Ukrainian, not. I don't know if there's really a difference, but but if there are ethnic Russian people that are having trouble in the contested regions, that needs to be addressed. But again, because it takes so long to address such things, there's like an interim agreement that we need, and we need to back away from the war. We need to make it not an option. Que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. We just commit to peace. And you could even do things like, I don't know how big the contested regions are. You could make them a by-managed autonomous region. I mean, you could make it, or even parts of it. Well, you can make it make it a peace village. You make peace villages and stuff like that. So you take what's happened and you turn it around. Kind of a never again mentality, that this is not where we're ever going to go again. Like they created kind of this Panmunjom idea, and maybe it never progressed to where it needed to be. Well, you have places to meet, and you don't have to, we don't have to struggle to meet. Again, when I look at the other meetings, they were just no, they weren't the right place, the right mentality. Again, that region is generally highly spiritually charged. So let's bring our spiritual leaders in, even though maybe our spiritual leaders made a decision for one side or the other. This is where we move forward and we come together. And we meet in the spiritual structures and seek the protection of God and the blessing of the clergy there while we're negotiating. Before we negotiate, and then, of course, while we're negotiating, we're surrounded by spiritual protection. I mean, I don't even know what the structures are used. Who knows it? It could have been devils in there from something that happened in the past. It could be resident demons. Then your minds will never get anywhere. Right. So let's seek the protection of things that we know have spiritual power, like, St. Basil's Cathedral, St. Sophia's Cathedral. There's a couple synagogues that came up. And then it's going to set a certain mood. It's going to trigger your minds. It's going to clear your minds. Or at a minimum, bring them in wherever you're going to do it. Bring clergy in, bring a choir in. Religious rites and sacraments. I'm sure Pope Francis would make the trip. And, he's kind of having trouble a little bit, but I'm sure he'd make the trip if you would commit to that. I'm sure Pope Francis will come and bless your peace talks personally. I'm sure of it. I mean, he would. There's nothing. I don't think there's anything that would stop Pope Francis from coming and blessing your peace talks personally. I'm sure he would shake every one of your hands, and heal every one of you in the midst. That would be his life's work, the culmination of his life's work in a certain way, or at least his later life's work. So again, you have a lot available to you in the spiritual world. And I think, again, the idea of neutrality, of respect. You don't just go to Russia. You just don't use Russian people or Ukrainian people. And again, my stepfather was Romanian. I know the mindset. I knew other Romanian people. I knew some Russian people. My grandmother was, she was born in the United States, but she was like first generation or so born here. And she had a way about her. She'd say things in Yiddish that shouldn't be said. Thank you, Larry. So I know the mindset. And again, to a certain degree, it's here also now. So again, I knew that Russians were being discriminated against in Ukraine, or ethnic Russians. I knew that. I mean, maybe you don't believe, that the response from Russia was not, you don't feel it was warranted, yada, yada, yada. But yet there was a truth there, so we had to address it. You see how, again, I call it due diligence. God kind of focused me on that word. So we didn't do our due diligence, we ended up in war. Yeah. Well, I think the issue with NATO comes from something else. Again, if people are corrupt, then there's going to be this feeling that the entity is corrupt, and therefore there's no security around that entity if it comes close. I think Russia's secure. I think Russians let me say that. Russia's not secure because people in CIA, people in spy agencies hate Russia, hate Putin, and they're going to cause trouble. Again, KGB did the same thing. What are they now? GRU or something, whatever they are. Right. So again, it comes from that also, knowing that something is trying to encroach. And some of it was that Vladimir Putin just was anti-LGBTQ. And people were pro-LGBTQ and they wanted to depose that leader. I mean, I honestly believe it got to that point. Again, you're not going to change Vladimir Putin and LGBTQ by going to war. In fact, I think he railed against it even more so. But if you became friends with him, maybe it would have changed. I mean, I don't think he ever met with Grinnell. I can't remember if he did or not. Who was Grinnell? What was Grinnell's position? Maybe he wasn't in position either. But that's the type of thing that changes it. Right. I've told you that for decades. I said for years that I did take Ukraine's side, that initial one. Again, they were interfering in the Ukrainian government. But when the United States just really did let that lapse and not do anything, I was like, well, what do you? At first, I was like, yeah, the battle's on again. And then I said, wait a minute. Here we are 10 years later, and you haven't done anything. It's a mess. Right. Well, they attacked me, and I lost focus on it. So again, whoever attacked me in that Ballast Enterprises place destroyed my focus on that conflict. And then, of course, they continued to attack me when I went back to the Warren property there. The local people were kind of shitty, but Warren Properties was I felt like a great, I felt grateful for Warren Properties. I mean, you're not going to have a place like that in Santa Fe for what I was paying. Right? It would have, if they hadn't messed with me, it would have been totally acceptable. Right. Thank you, Mary. But I'm really a humble person. And that life, I was able to build that wall and those little religious things, the Torah Ark, and that was joyful for me. It was great to see that. So again, I don't think we're very far from a decision for an unconditional ceasefire. I don't think we're that far from it, and that's the point. The only way to get there is probably because there's so many sticky issues. Which is an initial unconditional ceasefire. It's just to agree to disagree, and we'll get forward to this. Right. I don't know how the only process to take. But again, there's probably, realistically, there's going to be some agreements that need to be made. Well, again, there's spells and things. If you're wondering what happened, your minds were spelled. I think I even maybe brought that up a couple times. So you were under a spell. That's why you warred. I don't understand why. And maybe you didn't see my stuff. I don't know. But I said, no, this is not going to be good. Don't do it. I said, Russia, they're going to be up in your country, and there's going to be terrorist activity, and there's going to be war up in your country. It's going to degrade to that. And then I said to the United Nations, I said, you need to send people into Russia. You need to respect their concerns. Because there was this slant. Well, albeit Russia may have moved in what you believe is the wrong way. It may have been the wrong way. But, as the United Nations, you have an obligation to try to avert that war. And the United Nations kind of lean towards favoring Ukraine, which would cause a reason for the war to actually happen. Again, you may not have seen my stuff. I don't know what the spies do to hide my stuff or not hide my stuff. I know once upon a time they hid everything. I had, that's why they isolated me. I had a friend that was a cop in the rail yard cop, and in Santa Fe, and I rode my bike over. I said, "Hey, look this up." He goes, "I can't see it." He couldn't see it. I mean, they're sick people, man. Nah, it's spies and dirty spies, dirty cops, and social media. That's what destroyed the country. Social media platforms owe me millions of dollars. I was tortured on them with intention. They had intention to torture. So again, that's how I know Vladimir Putin was manipulated. That's how I know Trump is being manipulated. And that's why God is going to have your IT, artificial intelligence structure destroyed if it takes that. There'll be a point where people go on the street, start ripping out those cameras, start destroying any part of the surveillance system, the surveillance state, if you don't change. They'll be up on top of street lights, ripping down the cameras. En masse, everybody in the streets, if you don't change. Because I can see it. There could be 70-year-old women in the streets destroying your surveillance system, knowing that you killed family members using spy activity. It's that bad. Our government killed people intentionally using spycraft. Disgusting filth. Pigs. Piggish people. That's who these people are. Rip them out of those offices. Don't send them to the office. Get them out of there. You should be lucky they work from home. They're that disgusting. Thank you, Larry. They kill somebody and laugh. Just like Satan. So when's Kash Patel going to be confirmed? Are we there yet? Enough stalling. They have a few more records they probably want to shred, right? That's the part that maybe you don't know. You're not going in and going to find much. You're going to have to investigate it. But what you do is you investigate what may have been shredded, what may have been destroyed, and then you get a few people on that. Thank you, Larry. I spent the last 6 months probably starting to shred. And it looked like Trump was going to win. Right. They alter the files also. Like, I guess Kash Patel said he saw the Kennedy files. Well, you saw what's left of the Kennedy files. They're not honest at all, man. Don't ever think they even have one shred of decency or honesty. Not even one little bit. They're devils, man. It's true. That what the people wanted to see in the Kennedy's trial files were shredded and destroyed years ago. Right. Trump likes when I do that, when I yell at you. I yelled at Trump before, though. Inside. I yelled at him inside. Well, because I think I was connected to Trump. I'm almost sure I was connected to Trump before he ever went into politics. I saw him one day, and that's probably when the connection happened. Like on television, but I saw him. Right. It's not perfect. It's like I don't even hear from God all the time. Right? So you don't hear from people when you need to hear them sometimes. Right. So again, we can get out of where we were. We don't have to destroy people. Trump, I don't know. I don't get it. I know he's angry, but you made money off gay people. You help the gay culture help make you somebody. Right. But as far so what again? Yeah, isolating and articulating what's actually happening. So I brought up some stuff this morning where we're really fighting inappropriate and possibly unlawful influence. Again, it's funny because oh well, isn't that like a disinformation? Didn't you? See, you got to be careful where they lead you. You're saying, oh no, the word disinformation. There's nothing wrong with identifying disinformation. Disinformation is not criminal, right? Unless it's criminal. So we already have terms to define criminal speech. There is criminal speech. Just realize that. Right. Again, fraud is a form of criminal speech. Right. And you have to be careful because, and I know what they do is they let you go out on a ledge, and I try to stop it. You have to be careful about your fundraising because it has it's not one party or another. It's all of you. It's really moved to a certain level of fraud. And you have to be careful of that because somebody can come back and get you. Well, I'm protecting the everyday person and the elderly. Trump got a lot of old people to give him money. But I guess so did Biden. So what I said is still true. So you were able to eke by. You really did kind of eke by in a certain way, but even though you did win, right, and win by in some what you did the first time, I knew you were going to do that. I knew that the Democrats were going to be stupid about that electoral college. I just knew it. I knew that's what he was going to do because he only won by like 1.5%. Right. But again, it's a scientific activity. And he actually put together a coalition. And if you're being honest, Harris would have been okay. I think Harris would have attacked the border. I don't think it was. I know she's subservient to the president, and and that's what it was. And she wasn't going to disrespect the president by saying, "Look, I couldn't do. My hands were tied under the Biden administration." I believe she should have said it. I don't think Biden was an honorable person. I believe he was part of the deep state, a major part of it. The question, not the question, but the issue is you can't become part of the deep state. It's attractive. You can use it. It'll empower you, but stay away from it. And again, investigating the investigator sometimes gets to that level. I don't think, like I said, I don't think Jack Smith needs a pardon. In fact, it might hinder his ability to articulate something. But again, it doesn't serve your purpose to bring that shit up again. So again, it's the same thing as the Russians. I'm not telling you to forgive and forget. I'm telling you to remember and never go there again. Right. It takes two to tango. You're powerful communities of wealthy people. So you have your own will, and I think you willed yourselves into war. You all used to getting your way, and you got your way. But again, there's outside influences and things like that. Well, really, we have to minimize the spy work. We really do. And I think China can agree, but you can't get there until you begin your conversations and begin to agree. As far as Taiwan, I don't even understand it. China was such a. I think, you know what the truth is? If China would just drop that part of it, they'd probably be more successful and would have less headache. It doesn't make any sense. You just have this little country that you want to take back because it was once part of your country. And well, look at your country; it's huge. Your gross domestic product was great, and it kind of slipped over the years. You're focusing too much on other things. But again, if you sense a threat, then you want to neutralize that threat. So where does that come from? Again, I think it's spies. I think we're all being manipulated by spies. I've said this before. They're running their own game. I really don't, Russia and China are some of the largest landmass nations in the world. Why? I don't get it. But again, somebody may have pushed you to step over the line so they could get at you. They can make money fighting you. Thank you, Larry. And that gives them power in the United States over somebody like me to kill me and try to adulterate my life. It's no lie. I was sexualized in churches. They call it bait operations, but until I learned spycraft, I didn't know what it was. But what they're doing is they're creating an environment where everybody was sexual, but me, right? So I need to come along and be sexual. And then along with that, they'll say, age doesn't matter. Age doesn't matter. Like a brainwash. They're brainwashing me. The youngest girl I ever dated was 24 years old. I was 38 at the time. It was very short. It was her idea. Thank you, Larry. Represent her. Thanks, sir. Like I told you, I've only been with like 4 women in my life. And one was a one-night stand. I had like a girlfriend, a wife, a one-night stand. Wait, that's it, right? Oh, I had an internet girlfriend. Oh, she was young. She was young. It was her idea. But we wasn't really much of nothing. Right. I was going to go to Colombia and try to help her. And that was it. Her and her sister. If it came as something, fine. If it didn't, then fine too. Because the trick is this. I finally learned it, and I think they knew I learned it. As long as I can get to the country, I don't have to marry the woman I visit. She can help me. Like if I'm too old, she can help me find somebody older. Right. But I can help them also get their life back in order if I can. But again, if they hadn't interfered in my life, it'd have been normal. I'd have found a woman close to my age, maybe even in a church, and it'd have been over with. I'd have been Larry at the church like before. But I never realized that I never had a normal experience in a church, except for here. Maybe that's why I ended up coming back here at Fort Riley. I was close to moving into Manhattan. There was a fabulous apartment for a great price, but I felt maybe it would be too easy for the deep state. But I guess the whole state's too easy for the deep state because I immediately ran into deep state quagmire. Right. Now in Manhattan, and again, the Republican Party had gone dirty and all that, so it was high. It was very Democratic Party or Republican Party centric. Right. Well, you became dirty. Are you attacking me? You're dirty. It's a fact of life. So there was a really nice apartment in Manhattan. At this point, I wish I had just moved into it. I was so close. I was just going straight up to Manhattan and renting that apartment. At a great price, too. Right. And at this point, hindsight being 20/20, I should have. I'd have been in an apartment right away. Because they had vacancies. There was no problems. I don't know, maybe the deep state could have altered it, but I looked it up online. I think I could afford a 2-bedroom. newer construction. But I thought, it's limited access to people, places, and things. But again, I'm a veteran, so it may have actually worked better. And a veteran of the Big Red One, so combat veteran of Big Red One. So. Thank you, Mary. And maybe I should have, because those are the communities that I kind of lived in for quite a few years. I mean, I don't know if there's any respect left. There used to be respect, military communities used to have a certain level of respect. I called out each state. They're not veteran states. They pretend that they support veterans. They don't support veterans. They kill veterans. Right amount of money, they kill veterans. So again, I'm going to let this go here for now. I'll be back on in a little bit. Oh, I left that photo up there. So the negotiation needs to be quick and to the point, and then the rest negotiated later. It'll feel good. It'll feel good to get out of the war. Okay. You don't know that yet, but once you the sigh of relief. You don't have to worry about certain things at that point. To a certain degree, the 10% tariff or 15%, whatever President Trump said, that's not your biggest concern. It is a concern, but not your biggest. Your biggest concern is, you need to get forward of what's been going on. Again, it's a mind that you didn't need to be in, and you got stuck in it, and it happens. So you need to be extracted. That's why I'm saying we need to stand side by side with them and help them extract themselves from it, because it's like gambling. And it's not necessarily their fault. I don't know what led them to that point. They could have been spycraft manipulated. Like they wanted to get rid of Putin, figured that's the way you get rid of Putin, is to push his buttons until he, gotcha, the old gotcha, like I speak about. Well, stay peaceful.